Today's story starts with what seemed like a routine missing person report, but it quickly spiraled into something far more sinister. We're going to pull back the curtain on a twisted tale that unraveled a shocking secret in a young woman's life that no one, not even her closest friends, saw it coming. It's a quiet spring night in 2018. The Kalamazoo police are called to an off-campus apartment building near Western Michigan University. A 24-year-old student named Aniya Mack has been out of touch for a few days, highly unusual behavior for someone known to be a social butterfly. The police arrive, expecting to find a simple explanation. But they find no signs of a struggle. Instead, they discover a series of strange, unexplainable details in her apartment. The mystery deepens until an unexpected encounter outside the building changes everything, forcing a dark secret into the light. The truth will leave you speechless. Stay with us as we dive into a case that proves some secrets are just too deadly to keep. In the quiet, early hours of Thursday, the 28th of June 2018, the air was still as Kalamazoo police officers responded to a call at the Hunter Ridge Apartments. This wasn't a party gone wrong or a noise complaint. It was a desperate plea from a worried friend. The building was a hub for local college students, but on this particular night, the focus was on one of its residents, 24-year-old Aniya Mack. A psychology major at Western Michigan University, Aniya was known for her vibrant personality and constant connection to her friends and family. However, no one had heard from her since the previous Sunday. Just a few days of silence, but for a young woman so full of life, it was a terrifying sign that something was very wrong. Her good friend, LaQuenta Watson, was the first to sound the alarm. She told the police she talked to Aniya every single day. When calls went straight to voicemail for 2 days in a row, she knew something was off. Her fears were confirmed when she went to Aniya's new job, a position she had just landed 3 months prior, working with autistic children. Aniya was so excited about the job, and the idea of her simply skipping work was unthinkable. The silence was deafening, and every minute that passed made LaQuenta's heart pound a little harder. The anxiety wasn't just limited to LaQuenta. Aniya's childhood friend, Dominic Thomas, also rushed to the apartment building to meet with the police. He had been in contact with Aniya's mother, Loretta, who was in Louisiana, and all three of them felt a growing sense of dread. Dominic and Aniya were like family. They had been best friends for their entire lives. He emphasized that Aniya wouldn't just disappear without a word. "She would call me," he told the officers, his voice filled with a mix of frustration and fear. He insisted that he was the one person she would confide in if anything was wrong. Dominic's words painted a clear picture of a person who had a strong support system and would never simply vanish. The officers asked if Aniya had any medical issues, any psychological problems, or any history of drug abuse. Dominic confirmed she did not. Her life was a portrait of a responsible, engaged young woman. This made her sudden disappearance even more mysterious and alarming. It was a blank canvas where something dark was starting to bleed through, and no one knew what it was. As the investigation began, the first major red flag appeared in the parking lot. Aniya owned a white 2008 Malibu, and the police found it right where they expected in the parking lot. But it was missing its license plate. Just a few spots away was another nearly identical white Malibu. Oddly, Aniya's license plate was attached to this second car, which was registered to a man named Gustavo. Both vehicles had 2 flat tires, as if they hadn't moved in days. Someone had deliberately swapped the plates, a strange and potentially criminal act that baffled the officers. The mysteries didn't stop there. When they looked at Aniya's apartment, a light was on inside, and the faint glow of a television flickered from the windows. It seemed like someone was home, but no one was answering the door. The silence from within the apartment, combined with the bizarre situation in the parking lot, created an unsettling feeling. The officers couldn't shake the sense that they were no longer looking for a missing person, but rather for clues to a much bigger and more complex puzzle. The officers, now thoroughly suspicious, turned their attention to Aniya's boyfriend, Donovan Lewis. Known as Donnie to his friends, he was a former community college basketball player who had recently moved back to Kalamazoo. He had a history with Aniya, one that Dominic was quick to share. Dominic told the police that the couple had a volatile relationship. There had been arguments, and in one instance, police had even been called to the apartment. Dominic recalled a particularly disturbing incident where Donovan had thrown water on Aniya. The most alarming story, however, was about a time when Aniya came outside to talk to him, and he took off in his car while her arm was still caught in the window, dragging her down the street. This history of violence, even if it wasn't constant, cast a long shadow over the case. Donovan's past behavior immediately made him a person of interest, and the officers knew they had to find him to get his side of the story. The puzzle was starting to form a grim picture. Just as the police were beginning to form a profile of the boyfriend, Aniya's roommate, Cora, arrived at the apartment. She was Aniya's best friend and seemed as concerned as the others. She let the officers in, telling them that it wasn't unusual for them to go days without seeing each other. The roommates had been assigned to the apartment less than a year earlier, and their schedules didn't always align. The last time she saw Aniya was on Saturday, before she left for her own graduation. Cora's story, however, brought more strange details to light. She said that she had come back to the apartment that morning but went out again to see a movie. When she returned, she noticed that someone had been there. The air conditioning was on, and a load of laundry had been started. Cora hadn't seen anyone, and she had no idea who could have been there. She hadn't seen Donovan either. The police knew that if Aniya wasn't there, and the roommate wasn't there, someone else had entered the apartment. This person, whoever it was, could be the key to solving the mystery. The officers continued their search, stepping inside the apartment and immediately noticing more bizarre details. In Aniya's bathroom, the bathtub was full of water, as if she had been about to take a bath but never got the chance. In the washing machine, they found a load of laundry already in progress. It was a mix of men's clothes and 2 teal bathroom rugs. Cora confirmed that while Donovan did laundry with Aniya sometimes, the rugs were not from their apartment. The ones in their bathroom were a different color. The strange laundry, combined with the full bathtub and the air conditioner being turned on, suggested a very recent and unusual presence in the apartment. Cora told the officers she didn't think Donovan had a key, making his potential entry even more suspicious. The pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting together logically. Each new discovery seemed to contradict the last, leaving the officers with more questions than answers. The simple missing person report was turning into a full-blown investigation, with a long list of unusual details. As the officers meticulously searched Aniya's room, they found more evidence that her disappearance was not voluntary. Her personal belongings, her purse, Idaho, and bank cards were all still in her bedroom. A social butterfly like Aniya, who was constantly on the go, would never have left for a trip without her essentials. Her packed bags and her belongings were still there, untouched, as if she was coming right back. She also had a hairbag for her hair stuff that was still there. Then there was the car situation. With both Malibus rendered immobile by flat tires, how could Aniya have left? There were no signs that she had called for a cab, or that a friend had picked her up. The entire scene pointed away from a voluntary departure. The police now had a strong suspicion that someone had not only been in the apartment, but had also played a part in Aniya's disappearance. It was just a feeling at this point, but all signs pointed to one person they still hadn't been able to contact: her boyfriend, Donovan Lewis. The officers left the apartment, their minds reeling from the strange discoveries. Some were still hesitant to call it a full-blown emergency, believing Aniya might simply be with a new boyfriend or a friend and would return home soon. However, others, like Officer Lockett, felt a sense of dread. The complete lack of contact, the bizarre scene at the apartment, and the history of domestic issues with Donovan all pointed to something far more serious. The only person who could shed light on the situation was Donovan Lewis, who had been unreachable. Aniya's friends, Dominic and LaQuenta, had both told the police that Donovan claimed to be trying to contact Aniya as well, but this was only relayed information. The police had yet to speak to him directly. Officer Libretto located his mother's home and visited it, but no one answered the door. Just when they thought they were at a dead end, LaQuenta called Officer Lockett again. She had new information. She knew where Donovan was. He was finishing his night shift as a janitor at a medical equipment company and would be returning to the apartment at 3:30 a.m. The officers knew they had to be there. Officer Lockett and Officer Aday returned to the Hunter Ridge apartments in the dead of night, the air thick with anticipation. Cora and Dominic had already left, and the apartment door was still locked. The two officers decided to wait in their cruiser, knowing this was their best chance to speak with Donovan. As they waited, they went over the details of the case one more time. The two white Malibus, one with Aniya's license plates, the other registered to her but with no plates, both with flat tires. The unexplained laundry, the full bathtub, and Aniya's belongings still in her room. "I know this is a weird one officer said to the other. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Every detail, from the bizarre car situation to Donovan's complete lack of contact with them, screamed for more investigation. The officers knew they needed to call in detectives. The thought of Aniya being with a new boyfriend was a nice thought, but the reality was she had cut off all contact with her family and closest friends. It was a feeling, a gut instinct, that something truly bad had happened, and they were about to come face to face with the person they suspected was responsible. The two officers were standing outside their cruiser, discussing the case and their growing suspicions, when a figure emerged from the darkness. A man wearing a black t-shirt, khaki shorts, and a backpack approached them from the front left side of the cruiser. The man's sudden appearance was unsettling, but what he said next was truly shocking. Without any prompting or questions, the man walked up to the officers and spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. "I killed my girlfriend." The words hung in the still night air. It was Donovan Lewis. The officers were stunned. The missing person case they had been investigating for hours had just become a homicide. They immediately detained him, their disbelief turning to a cold focus. They read him his Miranda rights, and he remained calm, cooperative, and willing to talk. The mystery was already solved, and it was a horrifying conclusion. The hunt for a missing person was now a crime scene investigation, and the monster they were looking for had just handed himself over, revealing a secret he had been hiding in plain sight. Donovan Lewis was calm and composed as he began to speak, revealing the dark details of his crime. He confessed that about a week and a half before, he had moved back to town and found something incriminating on Aniya's phone. He had discovered inappropriate text messages from another man, and he believed they were messing around. He said he tried to get over it, and for a few weeks, things were okay. But on Sunday, a new argument erupted. Donovan explained that since he had just moved back, he didn't have a job and was feeling the pressure. He said Aniya was frustrated and told him he wasn't doing enough. He offered to call his father for help, but she continued to argue. The fight escalated, and the details became more and more twisted. Donovan's account was chillingly emotionless as he recounted the events that led to the murder. The officers listened, their faces grim, as they tried to process the cold, hard facts of the story. As Donovan continued to talk, he casually mentioned that Aniya's body was in the river, east side of the city, he said, in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. He told the officers that she was in a creek, shocking them with the grave details of his crime. He didn't seem to have any remorse, as if he was just telling a story. The officers knew they had to act fast. They immediately notified the homicide detectives. What started as a missing person case had just taken a dark and unexpected twist. The officers' initial impressions of the case had been correct. Something was very, very wrong. But they never could have imagined the shocking reality of what had happened to Aniya. Donovan Lewis was now officially a murderer, and the only thing left to do was find the body and get the full, detailed confession from him. It was a grim and heartbreaking task, but they knew they had to do it. The truth had finally come out, and it was even worse than they had feared. Even after being formally placed under arrest and put in the back of the cruiser, Donovan Lewis couldn't stop talking. He continued to give out scattered, unprompted details of the murder. The officers listened, taking in every word, knowing that everything he said could be used as evidence. It was a surreal moment. A man confessing to a brutal crime, without any sign of remorse or a request for a lawyer. Officer Lockett drove Donovan to the station, where detectives were waiting to begin a formal interview. As they drove, Officer Lockett tried to keep him talking, making small talk and listening, as Donovan continued to give away more details. It was a delicate balance between getting information and waiting for the detectives. The officers knew they had a rare opportunity on their hands, a suspect who was not only willing to talk, but eager to confess. The pieces of the puzzle were finally fitting together, creating a horrifying picture of a premeditated murder. During the car ride to the station, Donovan began to make a series of shocking accusations. He claimed that he had found text messages on Aniya's phone that led him to believe she was having an inappropriate relationship with her pastor, a man named Strickland. He said that this discovery was what set him off and led to the fight that Sunday. He believed that the two were physically involved, but he didn't have any evidence other than the text messages. The officers listened, taking in the strange new details. It seemed like every part of this case was more bizarre than the last. The pastor was a local president of the NAACP, a well-known community leader, and a married man. Donovan's claims, if true, would completely upend the public perception of this man and add another layer of complexity to the case. The officers knew they had to investigate this new lead, as unbelievable as it seemed. The case was no longer just about a missing person. It was about a web of deceit, blackmail, and secrets. As he continued to talk, Donovan claimed that Aniya, who was struggling financially, had been blackmailing the pastor for money. He said that the pastor had been paying her rent, her phone bill, and had even given her the second white Malibu to drive. He believed that Aniya was using their relationship as leverage, threatening to expose him if he didn't give her what she wanted. Donovan explained that the argument on Sunday was prompted in part by the ongoing tension from this situation. He claimed that Aniya, frustrated by their financial problems and his unemployment, had lashed out. He then described a disturbing scene where she laughed while she gave up her phone to him, as if she knew he was about to get a reaction. The officers were disturbed by this account, as it painted a picture of a relationship built on manipulation and secrets. It was clear that Donovan's actions were rooted in rage and betrayal, but the truth of his claims would have to be investigated. Upon the arrival of detectives, Donovan Lewis offered a full written confession to the murder of Aniya Mack. In his confession, he explained that the pastor, Strickland, had given Aniya a second Malibu to drive after her first one kept getting flat tires. He also claimed that the pastor began coming by the apartment more frequently to pick her up. According to Donovan, Aniya had admitted to him that she was using the relationship with the pastor for financial gain, threatening to expose him to his wife and others if he didn't give her what she wanted. He further alleged that the pastor had made it clear that he was willing to hurt her. The confession was a mix of self-pity and dark details. Donovan claimed he was drunk and exhausted from lack of sleep, having spent the night going through her phone. He said a text message from the pastor had him enraged, and an argument broke out. The details of the fight were now clear, but the full truth of Donovan's story was still a mystery. The detectives knew they had to verify every claim he made. In his written confession, Donovan detailed the horrifying final moments of Aniya Mack's life. He claimed that after Aniya told him she wanted him to leave for good, she got out a suitcase and started packing his belongings. It was at this moment, he said, that he struck her, rendering her unconscious. The violence wasn't over. He then went into the kitchen, grabbed a large knife, and returned to the bedroom. His confession continued with chilling detail, describing how he slit her throat and stabbed her. He then admitted to placing a garbage bag over her head and putting her body into the suitcase. In the dark of the night, he placed the suitcase in a dumpster outside of the visitor parking. The next day, he retrieved the suitcase and drove to Comstock Creek. The confession was a cold, hard account of a brutal crime, and it was now a matter of time before the detectives found the body. The puzzle was complete, but the truth was still hidden in the water. The next day, Donovan Lewis, driving his mother's van, drove to Comstock Creek. It was in the early hours of the morning, when the world was still asleep. He left Aniya's body in the deep stream, weighing the suitcase down with mud to ensure it would sink to the bottom. It was a cold, calculated act, a desperate attempt to cover up his crime and make her disappear forever. But he failed. His own guilt and the tireless work of Aniya's friends and the police had brought him back to the scene of the crime. The details of the confession were horrific, but Aniya's family was now closer to getting closure. They now had a location, and the police were able to begin the process of recovering her body. Donovan's confession was a horrifying look into the mind of a murderer, but it was also the first step towards justice for Aniya. The case was a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of betrayal and the lies people tell to hide their secrets. As Donovan's confession was being processed, investigators began searching the apartment for physical evidence. While Donovan had confessed to the brutal murder, they were still puzzled by the lack of blood in the apartment. His story of a violent stabbing didn't seem to match the crime scene. However, upon closer inspection, they found small but identifiable bloodstains in the hallway, on the edge of Aniya's bed, and on the bedroom carpet. They also discovered that cleaning products that had been in the apartment had been used to clean other surfaces, suggesting a deliberate attempt to cover up the crime. Donovan had also confessed to disposing of a mattress cover in the apartment dumpster and his own clothing at his mother's home. Aniya's personal belongings, her purse, Idaho, and bank cards had been thrown away in a bin near his workplace. The police managed to recover some of the evidence, but the mattress cover had already been collected by the time they got there. The physical evidence, though sparse, was enough to corroborate Donovan's confession and prove his guilt. With Donovan Lewis's confession in hand, detectives turned their attention to the other party in his story, Pastor Strickland. When questioned, the pastor denied any romantic involvement with Aniya, stating she was simply a member of his congregation and a member of the church choir. He claimed that Aniya was in a new relationship with a young man she had met during a choir trip to Mississippi. He alleged that she was hiding this new relationship from Donovan and had saved the young man's number in her phone under the pastor's name as a cover. Donovan, when pressed by detectives, admitted that Aniya had never actually admitted to an affair with the pastor. He said she had only claimed to be manipulating him for financial gain. The pastor's account of a secret relationship with another man cast doubt on Donovan's version of events and added yet another layer of complexity to the already twisted case. The detectives knew they had to dig deeper to find the truth behind the lies and betrayals. Roughly a month after Pastor Strickland's initial statement, he contacted the police again, this time asking to have the white Malibu returned to him. The car, which had Aniya's license plate on it, was registered to a man named Gustavo, but Strickland claimed that it belonged to his wife. However, he was unable to produce a title or bill of sale for the car, claiming he had misplaced them. He said that Aniya had called him and told him she had found the title, but the police couldn't find it. Strickland's inability to prove ownership of the car raised even more questions for the investigators. The car was a key piece of evidence in the case, and Strickland's erratic behavior made him even more suspicious. The car was never returned to him, but it was just the beginning of his legal troubles. The case was no longer just about Aniya and Donovan. It was about the dark secrets that everyone involved was hiding. The investigation into Aniya's murder had a ripple effect, and Pastor Strickland's life began to unravel. He was later accused of sexual assault by 3 teenagers in his church. One of the victims claimed that he had felt unable to refuse the pastor's advances because he needed the use of the car the pastor was lending him. This was the same car that had been found at Aniya's apartment. The allegations against Strickland and his wife were supported by text messages and screenshots from the victims' phones. In February 2023, Strickland reached a plea agreement. He admitted to using a vehicle to solicit prostitution, a lesser charge than the others. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison. In a lengthy sentencing statement, he continued to deny his guilt, claiming he took the plea deal to spare his family the trauma of a trial. The case against him was a dark and disturbing side plot to Aniya's murder, and it proved that Donovan's claims, though twisted, were not entirely without merit. With Donovan's confession in hand, the police had a location, and a team was assembled to recover Aniya's body. Donovan led them to a sloped embankment near Comstock Creek. An accomplished swimmer, he had wheeled the suitcase all the way down to a deep stream, a part of the creek where he knew it would be hard to find. The search team couldn't wade into the water, and a rescue boat was deployed. The officers used a rope and a winch to pull the suitcase from the muddy depths of the creek. While the recovery was successful, the murder weapon, the black-handled butcher knife Donovan had used, was never found. He claimed he had stuck it into the side of the creek near the suitcase, but despite extensive searching, it was never recovered. The recovery of Aniya's body, however, was a success, and her family was finally able to lay her to rest. The search for a missing person had come to a grim end, but the long and painful journey toward justice was just beginning. 3 days before his trial for first-degree murder was set to begin, Donovan Lewis made a daring escape from the Kalamazoo County Jail. He scaled through 15-foot walls, climbing over security fences topped with barbed wire and razor wire. He was captured just a half hour later, his jail jumpsuit found 100 yards from the scene. Donovan later claimed he escaped because he feared for his family's safety after receiving death threats, but there was no evidence to support his claims. Aniya's family, tired of the trauma and the public spectacle, agreed to a plea deal. In late 2018, Donovan Lewis pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 25 to 40 years in prison, with an additional 17 months to 4 years for his escape from jail. Aniya's sister spoke about forgiveness, saying she had not forgiven him but hoped he would have to live with what he had done for the rest of his life. The case had a grim ending for everyone involved, but Aniya Mack's memory lives on.